Hello and good afternoon.
Hey, Arrow, how you doing?
Doing very well. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm good. I'm just trying to. I presume you can't see me at the moment, right?
No, that's fine. We're radio people, and you're a musician, so pictures are for those that want to see. I don't know, like the horizon.
Okay, fine, absolutely.
Dude, how have you been since the last time we talked? Because I mean, your ideas of exploration have always inspired me.
Oh, that's nice of you to say. Yeah. Well, I've been doing plenty of explorations, that's for sure.
in the way of music, or just in the way of, hey, here we are today. There's a lot to be found.
Well, yeah. I guess my most recent release is partly to do with my. I wouldn't call it an obsession exactly, but high level of interest in this most recent upsurge in the kind of UFO, UAP world. So that's something that I've been interested in for a long, long time. Well, since the mid-90s, I think. And right now it's kind of got very, very interesting.
Well, I'm from the state of Montana, so we have the big sky country out there. And my entire life, I would go out there and I would just look up into the sky, and I swear that I would see things and people go, oh, stop it. You need to grow up and act your age.
Absolutely, yeah. Similar for me. I mean, I don't live in big sky country, but I've seen a few things over the years, and the first experience I had was probably in the 80s, actually, in the UK, and at the time I didn't really make any kind of connections. It was just a sort of strange sort of light zipping around the sky. But later on, when I started getting interested in the subject, I started to sort of think back on that. What I saw, because it's sort of, when you see something strange, it kind of etches itself into your mind.
It does.
So I could recall it quite clearly. And I started to think, I guess that is one of those, it's a fairly distant encounter, but nevertheless, I could acknowledge that it was something very unusual.
But you know what's interesting about that, Jack, is that you were called to that moment to see it in that moment. So therefore, it's going to change you. What do you bring forward from it? That's what I love about seeing things in the sky.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it does really alter your perceptions of, or your sort of estimation, really, of, a lot of the current theories of human origins and, why we're here and all of those super big questions, And I don't think it gives you the answers particularly, but it certainly gives you a bigger perspective.
Don't you see music as being part of that journey? Because, I mean, all of a sudden you're walking along. You could be at a mall or you could be at some sort of fast food restaurant, and all of a sudden this song hits you.
Mm-hmm. So very similar. I mean, I always think I have a friend, actually, who's a neuroscientist, I suppose you call him. He does research. He doesn't do surgical stuff, but he's involved with people that do, working with military guys who've had brain injuries, sustained brain injuries. And they do kind of brain mapping work with them. So he's a very kind of, what shall I say, mainstream. He holds very mainstream scientific viewpoints, which is essentially that everything that's going on is going on in your mind. And I really question that. And I always think of music as being the most obvious example of, that when you're performing music, and even when you're listening to it as well, you have a tremendous sense of collective experience. You're kind of linked together in the moment with music, and I think it points to ideas which I sort of subscribe to, really, which are that we sort of live in a sea of consciousness, that the universe, for want of a better word, is consciousness, and that we're sort of linked to each other and linked to it, through our perceptions, while we're alive, sort of thing, and possibly beyond that as well.
Well, we talk about that connection, but with this AI world that we're stepping into, doesn't that take away the humanism of making that connection?
Well, it does, and I'm very kind of skeptical about the claims made for AI. I mean, I don't doubt that it's dangerous, but not because it's going to replace human consciousness, but because it's, or the reverse, really. To me, AI and human consciousness are almost polar opposite things. Because human consciousness is about creativity and seeing new things. And AI is about being. It's not about creativity, I don't think. It possibly might be in the future, but even that, I think, is a sort of facsimile of creativity.
Well, it scares me because they can take our sound and recreate it. I mean, somebody else could be singing Dance Hall Days in the days ahead, and you're going to go, whoa, wait, that's my song. What are you doing with it?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, that would be interesting to hear. I saw something online recently where they took. There was a big thing about it. They took a couple of Beatles, well, post-Beatles songs. They took Paul McCartney's song "Junk" and had John Lennon singing it. And then they took a John song and had Paul singing it. I can't remember which one. The thing was that people online were going like, "Oh man, that's amazing to hear John singing Paul's song." But it's like when you listen to it, it doesn't sound anything like John Lennon singing Paul's song. It sounds a bit like John. But now I get these things will get increasingly sophisticated, and you'll be able to do stuff like that. But that's very different from coming up with the next song, or even more importantly, coming up with the next kind of artistic change in consciousness, because that's what, the big songs have always done. I think, like certainly the Beatles for me was a whole change in the way I looked at the world when I first heard them. I think for everybody on the planet, actually, who came into contact with the Beatles, it changed your consciousness, And I don't see AI making moves like that. Having said that, I do get that the internet is a huge change in consciousness. But I think the problem is that it's human beings becoming more like machines rather than machines becoming more like humans. The drift is in the wrong direction.
But yet, when you guys first appeared on the music scene, I was that 7 minutes.
I mean, I think all the 80s bands who sort of rose to the top at that time were, part of another change in consciousness, and it was very much related with MTV, which was a strange thing for me because I've always been a believer in the, for want of a better term, for the theatre of the mind, if you like. So in other words, you put the headphones on and shut your eyes and listen to the music, and you're away in where your imagination takes you. And when you have a video playing, replacing that theatre of the mind, if you like, it's possibly takes away from that sort of internally creative process. But I don't want to be like biting the hand that fed me.
So then what was it like to go in there to do the reissues? Because, I mean, all of a sudden you're stepping back into that zone that you were once in, that MTV helped bring forward. I mean, I'm such a perfectionist. I would love to go back there and just put in new harmonies, put in new instruments, do some modern day technology.
Yeah, there's a sort of temptation to do that, but I do see the old albums as part of their time, and for all their faults and limitations, I wouldn't want to tinker with them too much. I always remember reading about how Jimi Hendrix, before he died, the next thing he wanted to do was to go back to Are You Experienced and sort of re-record those songs, because he felt they hadn't been given a fair shot, because Chaz Chandler was so much of a kind of one-take guy,
Yep.
And I always think, oh, poor Jimmy, he would have really been devastated by the fact that everyone was going like, oh, we prefer the old versions, And so I think, especially in pop music, the recordings I think should be left intact, and don't futz around with them too much. Get more depth and breadth out of them if you can, but don't change it.
Yeah, because a lot of listeners don't realize you're paying by the time, and you're also playing by the tape. I mean, you purchased that tape. I mean, and that's back in the days when it wasn't digital at all. We weren't doing Pro Tools.
Absolutely, no. Those. I was reading some stuff online about the Beatles in Abbey Road, and we recorded Points on the Curve in Abbey Road Studio 2, where the Beatles did all this stuff, and we were in there for like 9 months easily, and that was expensive, and I didn't consider it at the time. I just wanted to be there, and if it took 3 days to record a hi-hat part, then that's what it did, it didn't occur to me until the 90s that I was still paying off that studio time with my royalties, but I don't regret it at all. It was a great experience, and that kind of connection with the past was really tangible through being at Abbey Road.
Speaking of making that connection, don't you think that fans are more loyal today? It's almost like we needed that 2 or 3 year lockdown in order to re-energize the purpose and plan of music in the way that, oh my God, I totally respect the artist more today than I ever have in my life.
Yeah, I think that may be right. It'd be lovely to think that was the case, and I think certainly people did get. Music is one of the things that gets you through your life. I know it's a sort of truism to say that, and I know, I've had a couple of people come up to me recently at airports and stuff and say, I just want to thank you for the music. It really got me through some difficult times, So maybe you're right. Maybe people have become more sensitized to the role that music plays in their lives.
Well, I have to thank you because AM radio was dying here in the States, and I needed music to keep us at least alive a little bit longer. And your band's music really kept us going forward because people would tune into us and then hurry up and jump over to FM.
Right. That's cool, and great, that people have this sense of, needing music to sort of make life almost meaningful in a way.
Yeah. How important is it for the listener to understand the true story and the history of the song? Because I grew up in the days of Dick Clark and Casey Kasem. We don't have that today.
I mean, I think it is important. You can certainly listen to any kind of music just on, like the surface hits you. I mean, that's the incredible thing about music, isn't it? You don't need to study it for 5 years and then you listen to it and start to get it. You get it from the moment you're able to take it in with your ears, And that surface level is great. But I think going deeper into the music is an important thing, I think the stories behind the songs certainly are fascinating. But I think also the way the songs work as music, I think of music as a bit like, if you can think of painting, when you paint a picture of, say, a landscape, then it sort of looks like the landscape, and people are quite often sort of thinking like, oh yeah, that really looks like the landscape. They're impressed with the similarity. But photography does that much better. Wow. And painting is really about something else. It's about the paint on the canvas. It's about the creativity and the way the artist sees it. And music is similar, I think. There's the impact of the music. There's the emotional impact. There's the emotional sense of what the song's about. But there's also a sort of abstract qualities of the music as well. The kind of sound, the balance of light and dark in the sound, the balance of the form of the song, and all of those things have always interested me. Even when I was a kid, I was fascinated by the way songs were, if you like, constructed, as well as by the emotional impact.
Comparing music to painting, I'm an artist, and I basically was silenced during a big show in New Orleans because to me they picked out the wrong paintings, and I really wanted something else. What do you do in those situations when those above you are saying, this is the song we need, and you're going, that's not the one I wanted to be the first one?
Well, you fight those battles all the time, and the sort of the front line of art and commerce is a difficult one to negotiate, and it's nearly always commerce is going to the bottom line, the lowest common denominator, and so it's a sort of struggle in the sense when you're trying to kind of, as it were, my assumption is always that people are going to be interested in the unusual and the unorthodox, and the stuff that points to a more kind of a mysterious direction. But I get that there are a lot of people who don't. Not interested in that and just want it to sort of hit them in the solar plexus and be straightforward.
Do you like the mystery of it all? Because they say that's the only reason why Led Zeppelin was big, is because it was such a mysterious band.
I totally get that, yeah. And mystery is certainly it, and they're a very good example, I think, of a band who I think are still sort of misrepresented as a kind of, the first heavy metal band, and I don't see them like that at all. I see them as a sort of progressive rock band, really. But more importantly, they're one of those highly individual bands like Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, Yes, possibly. They're kind of just one-offs, really. There's really nothing before them and nothing after them that makes any evolutionary sense.
I found it very inspiring in a small little note that you left to, and it was about, you were ready to talk about William Friedkin. I mean, that to me opened up my heart, because I'm going, oh my God, we get to hear a side of your journey rather than reading about it in some sort of magazine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah, my relationship with Billy was a very important part of my life, and I feel very blessed to have known him as a sweet, gentle guy, really. I mean, and I don't think there's many people in Hollywood who would, see him in that way. And I'm really not sort of like trying to sort of look away from the other side of him, because I never encountered it. He was always never anything less than encouraging to me, really supportive,
Mm-hmm.
And I remember us doing a Wang Chung show, when we'd come back. It was sometime, would it have been back in 2011, 12, something like that. And it was really almost playing in a sort of public park in LA to a lot of people on deck chairs and stuff. God knows how the gig got not put in, but it did. And I remember Bill came along with his family to that, you know what I mean, and stood very patiently to sort of come backstage, and I think the people on the doing the security was like, oh, who are you, sort of thing, and one of us had to go out and say, look, he's a close friend, and but he wasn't at all kind of perturbed by that, he didn't have a kind of hissy fit or anything. No, it's just not him. He was just really wanting to just hang out and see how we were and chat, and I spent a lot of time with him over the years, in the 90s when Wang Chung had stopped, when me and Nick had stopped working together. I still used to come to LA every year, and I quite often stay at his house, and we go to the LA Philharmonic together. Sometimes when I remember going on a Sunday afternoon and going to see them play some classical stuff, and we talked movies a lot, and we did all kinds of stuff, just hanging out together, going to restaurants and stuff. And he was always fascinating about movies and that whole experience that he had of coming from the days when Hollywood was run by the studios,
yep,
and his early experiences of working with Alfred Hitchcock and stuff like that, through to the modern era, where it's far more fractured and independent.
How would you talk to your 18-year-old self? Because, I mean, I'm 61, so therefore, people always ask me, okay, so when does the broadcasting thing stop? And I said, I'm not talking to that 14-year-old. No way. That kid's dream is still alive in my soul. I mean, do you face the same?
Yeah, I'd say the dream is still alive for sure. I've been very, very fortunate, that I've not had experiences that make me bitter or cynical about the business, and or maybe it's simply the mindset that I have. I try and see the positive in everything, and but I do think, I was in the music business, particularly in the 80s. It was a good time to be in the music business.
Yes.
In that there was a lot of money sloshing around in the business, and someone like me, who's not really a sort of the perfect fit for the business, was still given the breaks and allowed to sort of explore the territory. And I always feel that I didn't have to make, I think some people who have extreme success have to make extreme sacrifices in order to maintain it, certainly, and I always feel that I got a fairly easy ride, and didn't have to sacrifice too much, and still have a good relationship with my kids, and can still sort of go about my daily business, without being sort of by people and stuff. It's so I got close enough to it to really experience it, but not to be overwhelmed by it.
Right. Did you keep a defrag journal of some sort in the way that you broke things down? Because, I mean, when you, night after night after night, not every show is going to be the best one ever, but yet you go back and, come on, as creative people, we like to really go in there and examine what can we do better tonight that we didn't do last night.
Yeah. No, I never kept a diary. Well, I say that I did keep a diary sporadically over the time, but when it comes to writing my memoirs, I'm going to have to do a lot of remembering, going back to the original roots. And I guess everything will get slightly hazy as a result of trying to remember it, But that is something I definitely want to do. I want to try and recapture some of the experience of, a kid from a working class background in the UK, from a small town, having the experiences I had, and kind of the sort of unique set of conditions, social and fraternal and everything that sort of went with that and achieved it, and the role that the bands that came before me, how important they were to my conception of what I was going to do with my life, and what sort of almost what life was about, really,
God, see, that's what I love about music, is that coming from a working class background. I mean, that to me is you were putting your soul into the music itself. And a lot of listeners don't get that. What they get is they get to sing along with us, but they don't understand the journey. No,
it's a long journey, and I guess started it when I was about 8 years old, starting to learn guitar. And, I was fortunate to have a dad who was a musician. And he said to me, if you're going to learn guitar, you've got to have proper lessons. So I started sort of learning with this lady who seemed to me very old, but she was probably a lot younger than I am now, And but she taught me how to play chords and how to read music, most importantly. brilliantly, and but not in a kind of fashion where I had to where it was all like classical with a capital C. Do you know what I mean? It was just like learning music, learning how to sort of work with it. And then my dad had a dance band, really, a sort of throwback to the 50s. But by the time I was 12, 13, he was asking me along to play bass guitar in his band, And I learned a lot from that experience, trying to read the parts, of these songs that I quite often didn't know because they were a bit before my time, But also it made me really listen to the other musicians. And if I couldn't read it, then I sort of had to listen and react very quickly to what the next chord change was. Do you know what I mean? And so that was an amazing training, that learning to read the music on the one hand, and then really developing my ear on the other. I think those are two essential things that you need to do when you're as young as possible, really.
Yep. Did you ever rescue an instrument? My first instrument was rescued from a flea market, and in my dining room right now is a piano from 1868 that I felt like I needed to rescue. Did you rescue any instruments?
I mean, I still have the guitar that I sort of learned on when I was a kid, so leaning up against the wall in the bedroom. So I see it every morning, But no, I do have a very old grand piano that a dear friend of mine sort of lent to me about 20 years ago, and I've still got it, So I think that will stay with me. But that's an old German piano from the 19th century. Yeah.
Don't you love those moments?
Absolutely.
Where can people go to find out more about you, Jack? Because I mean, your story, your music, it's very much alive, and it needs to be in our lives.
Yeah. I'm on social media, Jack Hues Official on Facebook and Instagram. I personally run those things myself. And there's also the Wang Chung socials as well. There is a jackhughes.com website, but I rarely update that these days, But I guess, go to Spotify and listen to the music, listen to Wang Chung, listen to Jack Hues, me working as an artist solo, and also Jack Hues and the Quartet, which are my sort of more jazz influenced exploration.
Oh, modern day jazz just blows me away. I just think that what you guys are doing with jazz today to me, it's in connection with how we're moving as a generation.
Yeah, jazz is a very interesting area, I think, because it's so human.
Yes,
I think. As opposed to a lot of more electronically oriented music. Not that I've got anything against that. Nick and I we're in San Diego right now, and we were downtown last night, just went to a restaurant, and we were walking past a couple of bars, all of which were playing that kind of 4-on-the-floor electronic music. And I said, I can really remember a time not that long ago where hearing that kind of music was very unusual in the States. Everything was like played rock music, human generated music, and I sort of felt quite nostalgic for those times, actually. So the jazz thing is very much about, what I love about some of the jazz stuff I've done is the fact that it's, I don't use electronic instruments on it at all, other than there's a guy playing electronic keyboards and stuff, but it's all about playing, and I did a piece called The Canterbury Tales. I live in Canterbury, and obviously I was sort of riffing on the Chaucer's Canterbury Tales and stuff. But the piece ends with a recreation of the sound of the bells ringing in Canterbury from the cathedral. And I always kind of think, rather than sampling that sound, which would be easy to do, I try to recreate it using the piano and the double bass playing quite high and the guitar as well. And it's sort of, it's like really listening into that sound and all the harmonics on it, and I think jazz encourages you to sort of try and work with instruments and produce that authentic kind of sound as opposed to relying on electronics to enhance things,
Oh my God! You being in San Diego, that means you just went through Tropical Storm Hillary. I mean, was there anything there that would inspire you to create music?
Not really. I found it quite funny, really. I mean, I'm sure maybe there was some damage done, but from where we were, it just seemed like a wet afternoon in England.
Oh, from where I am, it was like the end of the world. I mean, we saw everything. It was evil.
That's how they portrayed it, But I think as we experienced it, I mean, it was raining pretty hard, but then that's dealable with, so it's all okay.
You got to come back to this show anytime in the future. The door is always going to be open for you, sir.
Thank you, Ara. I really enjoyed chatting with you, and I love that we talk about all kinds of different stuff.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
It shows your human side, and that's what I've always loved about you, is the fact that you are just such a regular guy that just happened to make music.
Yes, absolutely. I see it that way.
Well, you be brilliant today, okay?
Thanks, Ara. It's lovely talking to you. See you next time.